But somehow, some way, ladies and gentlemen, Kari Lake is behind Katie Hobbs.
We are now on air. Time for a total takeover.
It's finally here. Welcome to a new episode.
It's about to go down.
First and foremost, giving honor to God and to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for allowing me to see another day. And this is going to be short and sweet. I'm going to get to the clips that you enjoy. See that graphic next to me? That explains everything about the Arizona race and what's going on with the utter, just complete and utter taking away of an election from Kari Lake. And I don't care what side you're on, what aisle you happen to stroll your ass down on. Just look at the graphic. GOP state treasurer, over 250,000 votes in the win column. But somehow, some way, ladies and gentlemen, Kari Lake is behind Katie Hobbs. And as the snow and sleet and rain is coming down here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that is utter bull.
I know that when you won earlier in the evening last Tuesday, you believed that you were in the middle of a red wave, as so many had predicted. Now, it's funny to listen to some of these more left-leaning shows and anchors say, you know, how the right was predicting a red wave. Well, that's not true. It was coming from the left and the right. Virtually everyone, with just a couple of exceptions, believed the only question was how big the wave would be. So you thought you were in the middle of a red wave. It didn't wind up happening. Why do you think it didn't?
You know, there are some interesting things that are going to have to be analyzed. There are people saying that we won a significant majority of the votes for Congress, but didn't win a significant number of new seats. Some of that has to do with how the seats are districted. So gerrymandering can have something to do with it. I also think that it's very, very hard to win a vote where the ballots are mailed to everyone. You know, when it used to take some initiative to vote, I think that the voters tended to be people with more initiative and people, I believe, to be probably more involved and maybe better informed about politics. Now, like in Nevada, you know, it's very difficult to win when the franchise has become complete through mailing the ballots to everyone. I think it's also harder to verify who these are. Now, I'm not saying there was widespread fraud, but I am saying it's easier to verify who someone is if they show up. And the sort of tragic comedy of Arizona, not looking at Chad's, but looking at everyone's signature, shows that they know that there could be a problem and they're trying to prevent it. But that problem doesn't exist when you vote in person with an ID. And so I really think that it also, I guess, creates more doubt on the part of the voter. You know, even though I can't say, oh, well, there was fraud, it makes me worry that I see all the candidates that I'm for winning on the same day of the election, and then I see drip by drip by drip as the votes keep coming in over weeks that they lose their elections. And so I think if they want to encourage, you know, the left says they, you know, it's all about democracy for them. If they want to encourage support of democratic voting, we'd all be more encouraged to believe the results if they all came in a very timely fashion and were counted that day. Why a state would take early voting and not start counting them before the day of the election? If it takes 2 weeks for Arizona to count its mail-in ballots, for goodness sake, they should start counting them 2 weeks before the election's over. So, you know, I think that there are a lot of things going on with the way the elections are run that make a difference. The 10 states that send out ballots to everyone, 9 out of 10 are dominated by Democrats. Utah is the only exception. So I think how we run our elections is important. And like in Kentucky, I think 95 to 98% of people showed up and voted in person, which I think is a better way to run an election.
It's the way we always used to do it and worked out fine. And there wasn't a lot of election denialism going on back in those days. What about Trump? New York Post, Wall Street Journal, some on Fox pointing the finger at him as responsible for bad candidate quality, making certain candidates embrace his election denialism. J.D. Vance has an op-ed out today saying, don't blame Trump. What the GOP needs to do is build a turnout machine, get more money, saying our party has one major asset, contra conventional wisdom, to rally the voters we need, President Donald Trump, now more than ever, we need his leadership to turn these voters out, and we suffered from his absence from the stage. So which camp are you in?
I think it's easy for people to have arguments when you lose. Everybody's got an argument because nobody wants to take responsibility. But it's probably in all of the above that there's a little bit of everything involved in why people lose. But when you say it's candidate quality, if I were one of those candidates, I'd take offense to that. But just for example, Dr. Oz, I think he's an intelligent, well-spoken. He was on daytime television for 10 to 15 years. He connects with people. I've seen him do the one-on-one town halls. He really can talk to people and listen to people. And hands down, he knew the information better and could, present himself in a debate. His opponent was and is severely impaired, and yet the opponent won. So I think it's unfair to Dr. Oz, and also not an accurate thing to say, oh, Fetterman was the better quality candidate and Oz was lacking in quality. That's not right. To blame it all on Trump's not right. To blame it all on McConnell's not right. It's a combination of things, but it's also, I guess I'm not big into the blame game. I'm into what do you have to do moving forward. For example,
that may require some blame.
Say again?
That may require some blame, right? Like if there was one major force working for evil, like some tell, like John Podhoretz, I keep mentioning him because he's a never Trumper who really thinks Trump is to blame for all this stuff. Then we need to know that, right? So, I mean, an honest look would require factoring in everything and seeing whether it's real.
Yeah, and I guess, but the thing is, if I'm looking at Pennsylvania, I'm looking at a state that they describe as Alabama in between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. The rural part of Pennsylvania is probably as conservative maybe as Kentucky is, but Pittsburgh and Philadelphia dominate. Probably together, they're more than half of the vote, would be my guess. And so the problem really is, if you want to win Pennsylvania, try, instead of getting 10% of the black vote, we need to get 20 or 25%. Now, it's easier said than done. We've been saying it forever. But I can give you an example. In our state, our attorney general is Republican, African-American. Our previous lieutenant governor, when we had a Republican governor, African-American, good friend of mine. She served in the military and also came out of the Tea Party, and I met at some of the first Tea Party movements. We had several other candidates that were great candidates, all African-American, all running as Republican. You just have to keep doing that year in and year out till the African-American public says, well, these Republicans aren't too bad, maybe I'll consider it. But
right,
for
this isn't
decades,
like a white country club.
We weren't even being considered. Say again?
Yeah. I said that until they look at the party and say to themselves, okay, this no longer looks like a white country club. You got people like you mentioned, Daniel Cameron, you got Winsome Sears, lieutenant governor in Virginia, and so on. And the party is definitely becoming more diverse. There's no question about it. But yeah, bigger numbers, especially now that they're losing so many white suburban voters to the Dems. Let me ask you this, because I'm not that interested in this, but I should spend a minute squabbling over leadership fight, who should be in the leadership. McConnell, should he be the leader of the minority now in the Senate? Should Kevin McCarthy be the leader over in the House? Would you support McConnell? And do you support a vote before George is decided?
I think it's probably better to wait on the vote. I think that we don't know who's going to be the senator from Georgia, but we also don't know who the senator is from Alaska. This is for the next session. Does the current senator from Alaska, she's probably going to win, I think, in the ranked choice. But should she vote on the next one? I guess she doesn't get to vote now because she hasn't been declared the senator for January. But is that fair to her not to let her vote? Or is it fair to Herschel Walker just to say, oh, yeah, we really want you to win, but you don't get to vote on who the leader is?
Yeah.
So
we don't care what you have to say.
Makes no sense to have the vote now. They should definitely wait.
Of course, you were 100% right on opening the schools. It's insane to me. I said this the first time we talked, that was your, quote, sin, that you wanted the schools. That's what got people so upset. Okay, sure. But in any event, The Atlantic just did an article on Ron DeSantis. The headline is,
gamble.
I can't find the headline.
They said it was a gamble.
Yes, but what they basically said was, okay, here's what he did. He gave people freedom. They were free. People were free in Florida, free to support their family, free to attend school, free to run a business, free from the constraints of fog glasses and not being able to unlock their iPhone. To that, a liberal might add, free to get sick or even die from a respiratory disease for which safe, effective vaccines are available, which is exactly the point. DeSantis, his COVID policies reassured members of his political base that they were in control. They understood the risks and took them anyway. And although Florida had a relatively high COVID death toll, the welter of confounding factors, weather, demographics, wealth, denied liberals the smackdown they craved. Kind of
And
interesting.
even
It's a
and
begrudging,
citing,
like, okay.
yeah, and first of all, the headline makes me a little nuts. It wasn't a gamble. It's exactly what almost every European country did, which is in the article, right? How can that be a gamble? We
Yeah.
were the outlier here in the US in the blue states and cities. He also allowed people who were sick and dying in the hospital to have relatives with them. Like, this was the humane choice. And he wasn't betting on it. He was informed by data. He did a round table with doctors. Did any other governors do that? Not that I know of. They just adopted the stance handed down from public health. I would be willing to wager a lot that he is more informed on COVID data than any of the other governors. But like I said, Polis also was very reasonable. He got the schools opened. He didn't mandate masks or the vaccine, and so there's a lot of overlap there. And so I think they were the most dominant in every race. And Polis, they're saying, turned his state that was once purple blue. DeSantis turned a state that was recently purple red. But they did it in a similar way, if you think about it. Now, stylistically, they're very, very different. Polis is much sort of quieter and more reserved. DeSantis is not that. He's fiery, but it's not just fire and brimstone and screaming at people and calling them names. He actually is putting the policies into place that the citizens of Florida want.
Well, then you have Whitmer, who dominated in Michigan despite being governor lockdown, but abortion was a very big deal there. And you got Hochul winning in New York, but we're so blue in New York. It's just tough to unsee. I mean, Lee Zeldin did a great job, but it's just tough.
And
let me ask you about
some
this.
Of the local races Republicans did get in New York. And I will say I will make one other point is there was a real sort of trend towards school choice in this election, whether it was school board candidates or governors, even, Governor Hochul lifted the limit on charters, Pritzker, supported private school vouchers. So that isn't something people are talking about a ton. Corey DeAngelis is, but there is a real trend towards choice for schools, for parents. And it came from both Republicans and Democrats. Now we'll see if folks like Pritzker and Hochul follow through.
Yeah. I got to tip the hat to Moms for Liberty down in Florida. I spoke with they're beyond Florida, but I spoke to this group a couple years ago, and they talked about how they had run for school boards and they were out there knocking on doors trying to change some of these COVID policies and stand up for their kids on the radicalization of the agenda being pushed on them, the social agenda in schools. And one of them had dog feces slammed against her door. I mean, they were getting a lot of incoming, but they kept going. And the GOP dominated every school board race in Florida, thanks to Governor DeSantis' endorsement too this past Tuesday. So there were some small victories.
In recent days, I think it was the New Yorker that was about the sort of school choice wave that happened in the election. They talk about Moms for Liberty and basically call anyone who's for school choice a white Christian nationalist. So
of course,
apparently that's what I am now, even though I'm a Jewish atheist.
Details, stop it.
It doesn't matter.
Okay, let's talk about the latest bit of, quote, science, capital science. New study in the New England Journal of Medicine. This is from our pal Carol Markowitz, again, New York Post, saying mask policies, this is what it purports to show, that mask policies in schools work to contain COVID. But that's not all. The authors conclude, quote, we believe that universal masking may be especially useful for mitigating effects of structural racism in schools. Really?
That's
including
my favorite.
Potential deepening of educational inequities. And as Carol puts it, sure they do. Why not? And the next study will show masking fights climate change too. This is an absurd study.
It goes back to the woke thing. It's like wokeness gone wild. All you have to do is say that it fights structural racism and provides greater equality or equity, and you don't have to defend it. They don't offer a rationale for that.
No.
They just say it like it's a fact. And there's a million confounders in that study, which make it incredibly flawed. And smarter people, scientists and doctors than me, can get into that. But it's about time frame and other confounding factors about the populations in those each of those districts. But the study is far from conclusive. But that line, it just exposes the absurdity. And the fact that they don't even bother to offer the rationale for that statement. I'd like
Yeah,
to
they know they don't
understand what
have
they
to.
think it is. I mean, honestly. And there has been nothing more structurally racist and classist than closing schools for 18 months in deep
Yeah.
blue states and cities where within the public schools you have predominantly low-income children, Black children, brown children. The nation's report card, the facts are clear. The learning loss is devastating, not to even get into the mental health impacts. But the data from the nation's report card, it conceals the worst of it because it's the lower income students, the Black students that lost the most. And the results are all just sort of blended and blurred. But it doesn't even get at the increased inequity that was caused by these catastrophic policies.
They got away with it.
And no one's really, one of the things that was frustrating for me in the election is no one's really talking about what do we do now? Because this is not, a lot of folks want to be like, oh, the schools were closed. Let's just kind of move on. Amnesty. Let's grant amnesty. No.
Oh, that piece.
These kids are still suffering. They are still... Chronic absenteeism in some schools is as high as, in some districts, is as high as 40%. There's schools, public schools, individual schools in San Francisco where chronic absenteeism is as high as 90%. This problem is going to be with us for a long time. The disengagement is going to lead to higher dropout rates. We know what that leads to: lower life expectancy, higher incarceration rates. Like, it's not over.